Okay, so, Stain's back. That's right, everybody's lovable serial killer is back to show All Might the proper path he has to take. You know, All Might's been really down and out lately, so he needs sort of like a fairy godmother sort of figure to appear and show him what he has to do now that Izuku no longer needs him as a mentor, and since he no longer has One for All, you know, what's his retirement going to look like, okay? Of course, in this case, we don't really get a fairy godmother, we got a blood-stained serial killer, but hey, you know what? The process is the same. This is My Hero Academia chapter 326 titled, Who Are You Really? Really, who are you? Who are you? Really? Really, who are you? Okay, so, this actually addresses something that has been building throughout this entire arc, like the Izuku, vigilante arc, you know, where the entire time Izuku's going out there in the world getting all covered in mud and grime and everything, fighting all these villains to the point where he is exhausted. You also have All Might that's, like, struggling as well, because originally the team was, like, All Might sort of guiding Izuku in his mighty supercar Hercules, which I still want to make a video about that damn car. I don't know anything about cars. I should, you know, talk to somebody that's like, hey, do you know mechanics? Do you, like, maybe I should talk to a car YouTuber and, like, let's talk about All Might's supercar. Let's do it. Anyway, so that's how it started, and it was, like, working out for a while there, but then eventually Izuku became more and more distant from everybody, not just his friends at UA, but also All Might and Hawks and Endeavor, who he was originally supposed to be working with, and so he's like, no, everybody is at risk except for me. I need to take this all on myself, okay? Now, Izuku's, you know, his little story there is sort of wrapping up, you know, with the class, you know, coming together and beating him down and then dragging him back to UA. We had a Todoroki moment, we had Bakugo's moment, we had Uraraka's moment, which is absolutely great. I didn't get a chance to review those chapters when they came out, but that was beautiful. And so, the people have sort of, like, at least tentatively accepted Izuku back at UA. It's like, alright, as long as he's just here to, like, chill out for a couple of days, I guess that's fine. You'd probably hose him down because he does look pretty rough over there. But then after that, maybe he can go out again and start, you know, fighting, because we don't want him in UA, but I guess we'll have to let him in UA, you know, kind of situation. But it was a really cool scene with Uraraka there, you know, pleading with the masses. That was nice. So now, really the only thing we have left to wrap up in this little moment, because we're definitely focusing on the fallout from the war at the hospital and everything. Like, so we saw what was up with Izuku, and then we saw what the students and what the principal and, like, everybody was, like, dealing with there. Now we're focusing on All Might, okay, and all the struggles and turmoil that he has to deal with. Like, that chapter when we actually first got to see Stain, you know, when Izuku left All Might, I mean, that was heartbreaking, alright? That was heartbreaking for the fans and also for All Might. Like, can you imagine? It's just like, this is the child that I gave One for All for. You know, he's the one that's going to, like, enlighten this world, and I have to be there to kind of guide him along the way. And he basically just told me, I don't need you anymore, All Might, and then he left. Because up until that point, All Might was probably like, okay, I can't be the pillar of peace anymore. I cannot be the great hero. I can at least, what I can do is train the next generation. And now the next generation's saying, you know, I don't even want you here. And then they leave. And then it's like, oh no. And so All Might's been sort of like in this mire in the last few days, you can imagine, where he's like, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. And so Stain was there and kind of saw, you know, Izuku leave All Might, but he didn't do anything. I thought there was going to be a moment right after. In fact, I thought this chapter was a flashback at first. I thought this chapter was a flashback to when Izuku first left All Might, and then Stain immediately, like, he was hiding behind a building, he, like, walked out and, like, confronted All Might there. But no, so this is what happens. So All Might learns about everything that happened at UA, and he's just like, okay, so, you know, Izuku's in UA there, all of his friends helped him out and everything, and so All Might gets in Hercules, and he just, like, speeds away, and it's like, well, wait, what are you doing? You know, what are you doing out there? You don't need to be out there anymore. And All Might's like, you know, there's still a few anti-hero factions, like vigilante groups that are all over the place. I'm going to go and try to convince them to go to a shelter, because it was revealed by 13 a couple of chapters ago that most of these vigilante groups are realizing how tough it is out there and how dangerous it is, and they only have a limited amount of experience and provisions as well. I mean, it's all well and good, like, when hero society first collapses, and it's like, we don't need no heroes, we can, you know, we can form our own hero agencies, right? And so they grab a bunch of, like, supplies supplies and materials, and regular citizens all band together. But it's been like 2-3 weeks, and so eventually tensions are running high, and All for One's got freaking assassins running around everywhere, and so eventually these vigilante groups are not like built for this. They're starting to realize, like, man, a hero's job is actually a lot of work, right? And so they started, giving up and going into shelters, but there's still a few out there. And so All Might's like, okay, Izuku is safe. All the kids are safe for right now. I'm going to go and try to do that. Like, that's the best I can do. Okay, so he's speeding around. He ends up back at Kamino, where, Class 1A formed together to bring back Izuku, where Dictator was attacking, okay? And so there's still some remnants of the battle that are there. Big chunks of, like, Todoroki's ice are still in the area. We see the statue of All Might after the Battle of Kamino, where he's holding up his fist, and he has a big sign over him that just says, I am not here. So, like, vandals are like vandalizing the sign like every day, because it's like, All Might, he was the pillar of peace, but now he's gone and everything went to shit because of it. So that makes it All Might's fault, whatever. So he's there looking at Izuku's collar, and then he looks over at the statue of himself after Kamino, and he's just like, keep in mind, it's been raining constantly in this area for like a week or so. It's like just been constant rain. I'm a fan of Bleach, and if there's one thing that just Kubo loves to do in Bleach, it's like, oh yes, the rain. The rain is symbolic of sadness. The rain is symbolic of sadness. The deep weight that we all bear inside of our souls. More rain! So Kubo does that shit all the time. Horikoshi definitely subscribes to that kind of philosophy, because it's been constantly raining the last, like, couple of weeks in My Hero, if we're going by this logic. It's odd enough. As soon as Izuku started to distance himself from everybody, and he set out on his own, and he took all of the weight of fighting All for One onto himself, that's all of a sudden when just constant rain befell Japan. I wonder if that's symbolic of something. We also get a big, I'm just gonna spoil it now, the end of the chapter, the rain begins to let up. The sadness is beginning to be lifted. I'm not making fun. I'm just saying I've seen this a lot in Bleach, and so it's like, all right, I see what you're doing there, right? Well, anyway, All Might's there, and he's staring at the statue, and this really is an impactful moment where he's, like, seeing himself back when he was the symbol of peace, and everybody looked up to him as the #1 hero, and he's just so dejected, and he's, like, self-reflecting on his life, and he's just like, you couldn't be there for them when they needed you most, All Might. You're just a washed-up hero. You're not even a real hero anymore, right? And so it's kind of interesting, because it's like he's talking to himself, like the All Might that existed like 20 years ago when he was like the pillar of peace and everybody knew who he was. And now here's All Might in his weakened form, unable to fight, unable to protect anybody. At least that's the way he sees it. And so he's like having a conversation with himself there. So at that moment, as soon as he bad-talked All Might, who is himself, as soon as he bad-talked himself, boom, Stain shows up with a sword pointed right at All Might's throat. And he hops on one of the ice blocks, and he's just like, you take that back! That man right there is the only hero that ever existed! All those crappy heroes! He's going on doing his Stain rhetoric, we all know that all too well. It's basically like, the way that Stain views it is All Might was the one that was always there to save people with a smile, no matter what. And every other hero is just a fake, they're a phony! A big fat phony! Basically, I think what happened was when people started viewing heroism as like a day job, it's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go protect people, but, I have my days off and whatever, I'm treating it like that. And there's still some really good heroes out there that operate under that kind of schedule, but that, like, infuriated Stain, because he's like, no, being a hero is not a job. Being a hero is a lifestyle. It's a way that you exist to help others, and you always need to be there. It's not a day job. You don't do it for the paycheck. You don't do it for the fame. You don't do it because you get a like inflated ego or whatever. No, you do it because you have to protect the people. That's why you do it, and that's the only reason you do it, and you're available 24/7, 365 days a year. Actually, throw on another day of the year. You're available 400 days of the year. That's what it means to be a great hero. That's Stain's philosophy, pretty much, okay? And that's why, like every other hero, we find out a body count for Stain, by the way. 40. He's killed 40 people. I'm a fan of, like, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, like 80s slasher movies. That's a pretty respectful freaking body count, I want to say. In fact, in, like, a couple of years, there might be, like, a a horror movie franchise in the My Hero Academia universe focusing on Stain as like the Jason Voorhees of this world. You know, I could see that happening, right? So, he's clearly insane, but that is his philosophy, right? It's just like, so he's there, and the way that All Might interprets this is like, oh, hi, Stain, how are you? Freaking All Might is so nonplussed at having a sword, just like a serial killer appear behind him like a damn ninja and lay a sword right at his neck. All Might's just like, oh, hi, Stain, you're the hero killer. Nice to see you. You know, I never ran into you while I was active, strangely enough, right? So All Might is just so done with everything at this point that he just doesn't care. In fact, there might be part of him that's like, you know what, just do it if you're gonna do it, right? I don't think that's really where it's going from, because later in the chapter, All Might admits, like, he never really sensed true bloodlust from Stain, so he wasn't really, because, you know, he's been a professional hero for 40 years of his life, for most of his life, right? And we even found out a couple chapters ago when those villains attacked All Might in Hercules, right? He gets out and he looks at them and he's in his weakened state. He can't really physically do anything, but just his stare was enough to like deter the villains and make them leave. Because he's still All Might. He still has all this battle experience. It's just he can't do anything now. So after years and decades, really, of fighting all these villains, he knows when a villain is actually coming for blood. He knows when, like, okay, someone's actually trying to cut my head off here, okay? And so he doesn't sense that from Stain. So he's just like, oh, you're the hero killer, right? And Stain's just like, I said take it back. Take back what you said about All Might. You know, he's truly a great hero. And All Might's like, oh, that's right. You know, you were locked away in Tartarus for so long. You actually missed a lot of stuff. You can't get any information in there. So obviously Stain would not know that this, in fact, is All Might in his weakened form after the Battle of Camino. Later on in the chapter, we actually find out Stain did know about it because he was witnessing Izuku leave All Might and everything. And plus, he's been out of Tartarus for a while now, so I'm imagining he would have found out that, like, what actually happened to All Might. You know, this is him. So he's not... He does know it's All Might, but it's sort of, like, testing him. So he's like, is this really All Might, though? I want to, like, because this is him basically meeting his Jesus figure, okay? So the way he's doing this is a little strange. But he doesn't have an intent to kill All Might here. But he's like, take it back. All Might's like, all right, I'll prove to you I'm All Might, right? And so he goes into his muscle form. First time we've seen that in quite some time, but it only lasts one panel, and he immediately is like, and he has to go back into his weakened state. You know what? Back when, after Camino, after it was revealed that All Might no longer has One for All, but he revealed he could still go back into his muscle form, but it's only like literally for like a second. Like, that's all he can do. He can like buff, and then that's it. Like, that's all he can do, and he can't move and he can't fight or anything. I was a little bit confused by that. I was like, wait, isn't the only reason he can go into his muscle form period is because he has One for All? But it's gone now. And then later on, though, it was explained, he's like, well, All Might did not have a quirk beforehand, so One for All sort of became his quirk, so his situation is a little bit different from all the other ones that had One for All before him. But also, it's like, I think just from an idea that, like, this story might still require All Might to go into his muscle form at some point, like the moment when he was confronting Izuku's mother and, like, I will protect your son, he went into his All Might form and, like, bowed to her to show respect, and, like, he made a promise. Like, that was important for him to be in the muscle form for that. And this is another purpose as well, where it's like, okay, you don't know I'm actually All Might, well, I can prove it to you, just don't blink, and, like, poof, it's like, I am buff, oh, I am not. You know, that's basically it. And it's also really cool to see the buff form, like, because All Might's got the cool leather jacket and everything, so when he goes into the All Might form, he looks really badass. Like, so I think that's the reason Horikoshi didn't want to just write off that form of, like, he can never go back into it again. No, he can use it, but literally for, like, a second, and that is it, okay? And it still causes him to cough up blood after, so he might not even be able to, he can't just be like, 1 second, okay, another second, all right. No, he can't keep doing that because he would eventually probably pass out, right? So anyway, even after witnessing All Might's buff form, like the form that he's normally in, Stain is still like, no, it can't be you, it can't be you, you know, and so, you're not a true hero, you're over here acting all dejected and sad, you know, that's not what All Might does, you know, and you know, All Might's there, and he's like honestly not disagreeing, he's just like, I'm not All Might, I'm not a true hero, huh? Yeah, you know, I've been caught thinking that myself a lot these last few days, honestly, right? And so we get a little bit of introspective into All Might's, like, what he's thinking about, like, right now. He's just like, you know, when I was a kid, when I was a middle school student, I saw the injustice in the world, and I saw all the people that were in pain. And of course, All for One was causing a lot of that, but there was a lot of other villain groups in the world and everything like that. And he just, like, I didn't have a quirk back then, but I just, no matter what, I wanted to help people. I wanted to change the world. I wanted to make it a peaceful place for people to live. And so I worked my ass off for that, and I got the quirk, One for All, and I became this great hero, and I thought I was making an impact. I thought I was making a change. But now I look around the entire country, and it's like, this was the end point for my journey. Like, it was really bad when I started, and then it got really good again, and then now it's even worse than when I started. Like, this whole country is destroyed. It's been raining here for like 2 weeks, and Stain's like, yeah, I know, this weather sucks. I'm like, I know, right? That's probably my fault too. But no, he's like, this is the end point of my journey. Like, I can no longer fight anymore. I no longer have my quirk anymore. Even my students are not even like by my side anymore. They're leaving. And so it's just like, what, like, All Might's having an existential crisis, basically. He's like, what was it all for? Why did I even do anything, If it was just going to lead to this, if it was going to lead to a situation where All for One is trying to become a demon lord or some contrived bullshit, and there's assassins on the street, and all of the citizens are huddling in evacuation shelters scared for their life that the next day might be their last. This isn't what I wanted. This is the exact opposite of what I wanted. This is my whole life's work just up in flames, right? And so Stain actually gets very offended by this. And he's like, you don't understand why All Might did what he did? Do you not understand? And so at this point, they hear something behind them by the statue, by All Might's statue. And so Stain is like, get down! And so he grabs him, and there's a funny scene where All Might's like, pushed up against Stain. Like, he's like, oh, I don't think he's trying to kill me, but does he think we're like best friends now? And he's like, and Stain cannot smell good. He's like been in prison for like several months, and he's covered in blood. It's just like, he's like, oh God, what? And so he's just like, get down, now look over there. And so they kind of peek behind the ice block, and they see that a woman is approaching All Might's statue, and she has some kind of quirk that allows her to, like, levitate herself. Not levitate. It seems like her quirk has allowed her to, like, create bubbles. Like, it creates little bubbles or trampolines or whatever, and so she uses that to lift herself off the ground on top of the statue so she can take off the sign. I am not here. So she takes off the sign, and she starts cleaning the statue. She's like, oh my God, they did it again. They came out here again and defaced this statue, like, every day with this, right? And so she starts cleaning the statue. And All Might doesn't know who she is. And she's like, who is that woman? And Stain is like, that right there is the last person that All Might saved. And I'm like, whoa! Flashback! Okay. At Camino, when All for One was attacking, and he used that big, he used all the combination of quirks, to, like, release that giant air cannon, and All Might jumped in front of it and, like, blocked the attack, and he was like, in the half-weakened, half-strong form, whatever. There was a woman in the rubble, and even back then, I thought, like, is she gonna be important? Like, when she first appeared, I thought, like, that was somebody we already knew. Right? Like, do we know this woman? But we didn't know the woman back then. She was just a random civilian. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so now it's like, oh, full circle. There we go. I love you, Horikoshi. Great job, man. So yeah, the last person All Might saved, definitely, like for the rest of her life, she is going to have that. Okay, like, she's going to tell her children and her grandchildren, like, All Might was the greatest hero ever, kids, and I was the last person he saved, so it's up to us to keep his spirit alive. That's going to be her life for, like, the rest of it, pretty much, okay? And so she's there, she's at a nearby evacuation shelter, but she sneaks out every day to clean off the statue that's always been defaced, okay? Cleans all the toilet paper and all the graffiti off of it and take off the sign and whatever. And she does this every day. And so All Might's looking at her, and he remembers her from Camino. And so, by the way, wasn't that an epic battle? I mean, I just rewatched it for this video, but oh my God, it's so cool. It's because I didn't put my back into it this time. Bam! Great episode. But anyway, so he's looking over at her, and he's like, oh, it is her. Yeah, I remember her, right? And so Stain begins to explain that, like, All Might no longer be a hero, but he saved people with a smile. It wasn't about his quirk. It wasn't about his muscles and fighting. That's not what All Might was about. The moment you start talking about it in that kind of context, you're missing the mark altogether. No. All Might pass the torch, like quite like literally, because passing the torch to Izuku, but he's like, no, he left a smoldering fire, and the people of the next generation are throwing the kindling down to reignite the flame even brighter than it was before. So Stain's basically kind of giving All Might, like I said, like a fairy godmother, like words of encouragement, kind of, right? From a bloody serial killer, but whatever. I mean, All Might needed to hear it. It's just here we are. You know, probably would have made just as much of an impact if it was coming from Izuku or, you know, some of his friends like Gran Torino or somebody. But no, it's coming from Stain. Whatever. What can you do? Actually, it might be more impactful that it's coming from Stain, who is a villain. Okay, but anyway. So Stain, we see this cool image of all the members of Class 1A, and they're all standing there, and the fire is being reignited, and so that's what Stain is like, you know, All Might is, you know, gone now, like the hero, but his spirit lives on in all of those that continue to be great heroes. And it's his inspiration that will lead to new All Mights further down the line that will carry on his legacy to prop up society as the symbol of peace. You know, it honestly kind of seems like, and it really is implied, because after this, Stain, you know, admits that, like, yeah, no, he knew who he was. He knew who All Might was the whole time, but he just couldn't handle his Jesus figure being so down and out and, like, you know, it's like, oh, I'm not a real hero. And Stain's like, that's not true, you are! And so there was a moment there where it's like, I need to convince him, right? And so All Might is convinced, and then Stain takes out his dagger and takes some pieces of paper and throws it on the ground, and he's like, here's some information from Tartarus. Here's some information on all the villains that escaped and who's still out there, and some information you can use. Use that information, do what you need to do, All Might, and then after you're done with all this, you come and take my head. The head of the serial killer that has slain 40 heroes. And then Stain walks away. All right? So it really seems like Stain, given his philosophy, he doesn't want All for One to succeed. He doesn't want All for One to become the Demon Lord and rule over the planet. It's sort of like a situation of, like, Stain is like, all right, if All for One is stopped, it has to be by the heroes. You know, it has to be by All Might and all of the heroes that follow in his footsteps that have to defeat All for One, because he's the evil boss. He's the Demon Lord, okay? Stain doesn't want the world to be ruled by villains, but if that's what happens, he's not going to stop it, because that's not his place. It's sort of like, okay, have you ever seen Hellsing? That's actually not a bad parallel there, where Alucard wants to die. He wants his, like, 500-year life to end, but it has to be done in a very specific way. It takes a human to destroy a monster. That was, like, Alucard's philosophy throughout the entire story of Hellsing. Like, if I'm gonna die, it has to be in a battle with a human being. That has to be how I end. And I'll let you watch Hellsing Ultimate if you want to see the end of that story. Go watch it. 10 episodes, OVAs, really good quality, Studio Madhouse, great series. But that's kind of like with Stain, where he's like, all right, if I'm going to go out, it's going to be by the hand of All Might or the hand of those that follow in his footsteps, that are the next generations of All Might, so to speak, right? And so that's what he wants. And you know, right after this conversation with All Might, he's probably just going to go back to slaughtering people again, right? He's just like, because that's what he is. He's the villain in his own, like, play. He has this own little stage in his head, and he's like, I am the villain, and I need to be finished off in the final act by the hero. That's the way it has to be. And so Stain, you know, sort of making a little bit of sense here to All Might. He's just a little insane. Actually, no, he's a lot insane. He's a serial killer that's killed 40 people. You know, he's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, so to speak. He's a total freaking nutcase. But what he is saying is actually making sense to All Might, and it kind of does get him out of his funk. And so All Might, he doesn't thank Stain or anything like that. That would maybe be going a little bit too far. But he realizes what he needs to do. And Stain's like, all right, here's stuff from Tartarus. All right, here I go back to killing again. Strumbly bum bum bum. And he, like, jumps off. And it's like, so yeah, they still have to deal with that guy. He's still out there killing people. But, you know, at least now they're on their path, right? And so the last scene of the chapter is the woman looking up at the sky above the statue of All Might that she just cleaned off. And so the clouds are finally beginning to part, and she's like, oh, looks like the rain is stopping, and then end of chapter. So yeah, that's how Stain is reintroduced into the story, and I feel like he's going to show up again. Like, I feel like in order for this all to really work full circle, Stain needs to die. Like, he has to. At some point near the end where, Izuku finally becomes, like, the true hero that he's meant to be. That might honestly be, like, one of the last scenes of My Hero Academia, like, to really bring it. Like, All for One is defeated at this point, but Stain is still running around and still murdering people. And Izuku's like, there's one more thing I need to do. And so he gears up and everything, and he heads out. It might be years. It really might be. Like, Stain might be out there for a few more years killing people. And then finally, Izuku runs across him, and Stain is like, you finally come for me. You are the new All Might. You are the new great hero. And, it would be a moment where they wouldn't even argue. It's like, knows why he's there, Stain knows why he's there, and he's like, all right, the final curtain draws on my life as a villain. Let's begin. And then so they would fight, and then Stain would be in, like, ecstasy as he's fighting, as he's getting all beaten up. Like, Izuku could, like, punch his arm off or whatever, and he would still be like, yes, more, I deserve this. It's just like that. He's crazy. That would be Stain. But then again, at the same time, Izuku would be a great hero. He wouldn't want to kill Stain. So I'm not really sure how Stain would view this. I'm not really sure, because he definitely wants to die. So he said as much to All Might here. I don't know how it would go. But yeah, that would be the situation. I mean, he might be on the ground bleeding out, defeated by Izuku, and Izuku's like, call the police, get him carried off or whatever, and Stain is like, oh no, it's not going to be like that. I had this epic fight. This is the beautiful end to my life. And then he has like a cyanide tablet in his tooth or something, because that seems like something Stain would have, and he's like, click, and then he's like, and then that would be the end of Stain, and he's crazy, but that would be like, the way he would want to go out, right? Being defeated by a hero, and he's like, yes, this was the end of the story. The world is in good hands now. And he would, also, the messed up way that he would view it was like, I was part of this. I was the part that led to this, because he sees himself as a martyr. That's Stain's character. He sees himself as a martyr that, like, I need to do what I need to do in order to guide the world on the correct path. And so he would probably view this chapter as, like, this was his shining achievement. Like, the moment where he steered All Might on the correct path that he needs to take. That was my contribution to this perfect, peaceful world. And then he would die. My hair is all over the place today. I don't know what's up with it. Anyway, so that's the chapter. All Might's like, all right, that was a weird conversation, but he's obviously going to pick up the notes and be like, I don't know what's in the notes. If it's like, all right, here's a list of all the assassins that All for One freed. You know what? Here's a question. So All for One has obviously told some of the assassins what they need to do. Like, you need to find Izuku Midoriya and bring him in and everything like that. That's what Lady Nagant was doing. That's what Dictator was doing and everything like that. All for One, would he know about Stain's philosophy? Because if All for One did know about what Stain is all about, then he would probably know that he wouldn't listen to him. It's just like, he's like, oh, okay, Stain... it's like, oh, if I tell Stain about what to do, Stain is probably going to go and maybe in his own way try to aid the heroes. Not aid them and actually, like, fight alongside them. That's not what Stain does. But, like, he might try to give information away. So maybe he let Stain out of prison and he didn't even contact. Maybe Stain got out of prison because they busted everybody out of prison, and Stain just went off on his own. And he didn't go to All for One, and he didn't listen to him, and he didn't take any quirks from him like Lady Nagant did or anything like that. Stain is out on his own, doing his own thing, and he just gathered this information on his own and gave it to All Might. I think that makes a lot more sense than him working with All for One. Because I don't think All for One would trust him. I'd be like, you're the hero killer Stain, but you have a very interesting... I know about your philosophy, because he wasn't exactly hiding it. So he's like, I know about, like, what you're doing and why you're doing it, so you're probably not going to be a great assassin for me, right? Because I'm trying to annihilate the heroes and everything, but he's doing it a different way than Stain wants to, right? So, yeah, it's a lot of philosophy and discussion on, like, Stain's perspective in life versus All for One's and everything, but... I mean, so Stain helped, I guess, but also is still a horrible person that has murdered 40 heroes and is probably going to kill more heroes in the future until he's finally stopped. That's kind of what he's trying to do here. But anyway, yeah. So I don't think we're going to cut back to Stain in, like, the next chapter. I think it's going to be quite a while. I think Stain is going to go off and do his own thing. Here I go back to killing again. But then, later on in the story, it is going to come full circle where he's going to be confronted by Izuku or maybe Bakugo or somebody, and that'll be the end of his story, right? But for right now, we're going going to probably cut back to Izuku, find out everything that's happening with him, and what's the next stage of this. And we might even cut back to see what's up with Tomura and All For One and their group and where they're at right now and what their next move is going to be after Izuku recovers. And so it's going to be like the next stage of this battle, right? So I guess this is a win. Like, the win of this is All For One did not grab Izuku, did not get his hands on One For All, so that's a good thing. But he also knows right where he is right now in UA, but UA also has the security measures, so maybe you could call this a draw at best. I don't know. But yeah, this arc is definitely ending. This might have been the final chapter. I mean, I could see this as the last chapter of this little mini arc, moving on to the next part of the story, which is like the final part of the story, provided there's not like a sequel series or something. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. This will be Tekking and Barry signing out. Later, everyone.